NBA 2023 First Round Pick Complete 30 Rookie Draft Number 1 Pick San Antonio Spurs Victor Wembanyama. The Spurs are as excited about landing Wembanyama as you'd expect. The word going around the combine was Coach Gregg Popovich flew to France shortly after San Antonio won the lottery. Meanwhile, Wembanyama's season continues, with Metropolitans 92 advancing past Cholet and leading his former club, ASVEL, 2-0 in the LNB Pro A semifinals. A deep playoff run could mean Wembanyama's season runs right up to draft night, with June 20 presently the latest date the finals could end. The basketball god smiled on San Antonio on lottery night, delivering the first overall pick to select a franchise-changing talent in Wembanyama. After toiling in mediocrity and not advancing past the first round of the playoffs since 2027, the Spurs finally went all in on rebuilding and were awarded the most hyped prospect since LeBron James. They'll add him to a strong group of young wing and forward prospects in Jeremy Sochan, Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson and Malaki Branham. San Antonio will hope to be competitive enough to vie for the playoffs sometime in the not-too-distant future, led by a rejuvenated Gregg Popovich hoping to leave on a positive note before retirement. Wembanyama would be a plug-and-play option on any roster, but his fit with the Spurs looks particularly snug. His extraordinary skill level should allow him to immediately become the primary target offensively on a team sorely lacking in shot creation, while stepping to anchor a defense that ranked worst in the league last season. In Sochan, he has an ideal frontcourt partner who brings physicality, unselfishness, feel for the game, passing and defensive versatility. He's played quite a bit of center in his career, allowing him to bring Wembanyama's slight frame along slowly handling some of the more punishing matchups they might encounter. After playing 62 games without missing a single contest, the Spurs will likely want to be strategic about the load they put on him next year, especially if he represents France in the FIBA World Cup in August as expected. Number 2 pick, Charlotte Hornets, Brandon Miller. Miller's camp says it is hoping he can do enough on his June 10 visit in Charlotte to convince the Hornets to give him assurances they'll pick him at this spot, something that might hinge more on how he performs in his interview than his workout. He Saturday down with 12 teams at the draft combine in Chicago, but arrived holding a legal brief written by his attorneys informing teams that he would not be able to comment on specific details regarding his involvement in the lead-up to the fatal shooting of Jamea Jonah Harris. It's the biggest factor holding him back from being the easy choice at no. 2, as many expect to be the case in Charlotte. Miller's fit with Charlotte's roster looks ideal, and he is considered the front-runner here if he can do enough to alleviate off-court concerns. The Hornets sit at a crossroads. After drawing lottery luck at no. 2 as a new ownership group takes over, there is a window for them to build around 21-year-old star guard LaMelo Ball and whomever they select. Brandon Miller and Scoot Henderson would be franchise building blocks. The roster itself will require further work for the Hornets to re-enter the playoff picture, as their last few drafts have been poor. But this pick presents a major opportunity to inject some energy and star power into the organization. Miller's upside as a tall perimeter creator with two-way impact ultimately moved him to no. 2 on the board for many teams over the course of his impressive college season. After taking their time to do diligence on Miller and Henderson, bringing both players in for 2 rounds of workouts and interviews, the Hornets landed here, choosing to pair Miller with franchise point guard Ball, rather than try to make Ball and Henderson coexist. Miller's ability to score over the top of defenses, as well as the spacing he generates with the threat of his shot, should make him immediately impactful for Charlotte as the Hornets transition to new owners this summer. He could be the exact type of scorer they need to take the next step toward relevance. Number 3 pick, Portland Trail Blazers, Scoot Henderson. Sources say Henderson is also very interested in Charlotte's situation and would welcome hearing his name called second, as much due to geographic proximity to his hometown of Marietta, Georgia, as the excitement over new ownership that is potentially taking over the Hornets organization this summer. If that doesn't materialize, landing in Portland and being mentored by Damian Lillard is also viewed as an attractive option. There's belief the two can play together along with last season's top 10 pick, Shaidan Sharp, and that Henderson can eventually take the reins of the franchise in the coming years. The Trailblazers seem intent on threading the needle between maximizing Damian Lillard's prime and stockpiling for the future, making moves to stay competitive without taking shortcuts that might hurt their outlook for when the Lillard era inevitably comes to an end. The performance of 2020 lottery pick, Shaidan Sharp, has to be encouraging when paired with the good fortune of moving up on lottery night to snag the No. 3 pick, setting the team up nicely for the long term. The main question will be how to keep the soon-to-be 33-year-old Lillard happy if the team heads for a third straight lottery appearance. The roster is lacking both in rim protection and defensive versatility in the backcourt, neither of which the No. 3 pick will fix in the short term. Portland's pick was more or less made by Charlotte, as this has widely been viewed as a three-player draft for a good part of the season, with the team picking third. With the talent drop-off after 3, there was never really any conversation about any other prospects beyond Miller and Henderson. Miller being selected second made Henderson the easy pick here, and there are reasons to believe he can coexist in a backcourt with Lillard and Anthony Simons, provided his defense and perimeter shooting improve. Henderson's explosiveness in the open court and ability to change gears in the half-court gives the Trailblazers another big offensive playmaker. It will be up to him to utilize his tremendous frame and 6'9" wingspan to his advantage defensively to carve out playing time. Several NBA teams selecting behind Portland
Henderson
speculated in recent
short.
days that the
King again,
Trailblazers
offensive
may
rebound.
in fact look to pick Thompson over Henderson. Ultimately, this has always been considered this a three-player draft and there was never any thought about selecting anyone besides Henderson or Miller. Number 4 pick, Houston Rockets, Amen Thompson. The Thompson twins have made themselves somewhat scarce in the pre-draft process thus far, measuring and doing interviews at the Combine but electing not to hold a pro day. Like most of the top prospects, Thompson plans to conduct only isang on-zero workouts for teams at this point. While his tantalizing upside makes him a candidate for the Rockets here, for now there's no foregone conclusion to draw at No. 4, particularly with steam gathering around James Harden's potential return to Houston. The proposition of finding backcourt touches for potentially all of Harden, Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr. seems less than ideal for Thompson's development. Whether the Rockets look to move this pick or stay put, No. 4 is where the draft truly opens up. Having made top 3 selections in the past couple drafts, the Rockets wound up falling in the lottery and face a key decision at No. 4, with the goal of competing for the playoffs. Houston owes its 2024 and 2026 first-round picks to Oklahoma City with top 4 protections and also owes the Thunder top 10 protected 2025 swap rights, adding further impetus for the Rockets to try and take a step forward, rather than potentially convey high-value picks. That said, there's no true win-now pick to be made here. And the flip side of that argument is that this may be the final opportunity for the Rockets to take a giant swing on a prospect before their draft capital becomes more compromised. Drafting with the relative luxury of knowing exactly which players would be on the board at No. before the Rockets opted to play the upside card on Amen, a player that will help fortify their backcourt and be the type of distributor other young players need to thrive. Amen will be one of the league's best athletes from day one, but will also need time to adjust to the speed of the game amid a huge leap in competition from overtime elite to the NBA. His speed, size and playmaking vision could make him a talented transition player, while his half-court effectiveness hangs to some extent on him becoming a workable jump shooter, something that will also take some time. This is one of the bigger risk-reward picks in the draft, but the Rockets, who are hoping to move back closer to the playoff picture next season, are certainly justified in taking a chance. Number 5 pick, Detroit Pistons, Ausar Thompson. Like his brother, Thompson might have a little wider range than you'd think, as he's an imperfect fit on paper for the teams in this range, and teams have lingering questions the Twins will have to address in workout settings. The Magic are building around two focal offensive players in Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner, creating a need for shooting elsewhere on the floor, something Thompson doesn't necessarily provide yet. But because Orlando has 2 lottery picks, there's rationale to swing on upside at no. 6, then address that need more directly at no. 11. Thompson's work ethic and improving jumper should give teams some optimism that he'll be able to iron out his weaknesses, and his ability to play off the ball might fit with the Magic. The Pistons were surely disappointed to fall 4 spots on lottery night to no. 5, but responded by making Monty Williams the highest-paid coach in the NBA, signaling an intent to turn the page on their rebuilding process. With one of the youngest rosters in the NBA, which hasn't played many games together due to injury, ending the franchise's 15-year playoff series win drought will likely take time, something ownership will need to be patient about. The nucleus of Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren is surely one of the league's most promising, but the odd lot of big men assembled will need to be sorted out. The Pistons have significant cap space to add veteran talent, and should be in position to compete for a play-in-game appearance if they can stay healthy and find a way to get their young players to take the next step in their development. Thompson brings strong two-way upside on the perimeter, with an aggressive approach and strong work ethic that ultimately help teams feel secure in selecting him. While his ability to catch and shoot has to continue improving, Thompson at 6'7" is comfortable playing with and without the ball, and has the agility to defend both bigger wings and smaller guards. It will take him some time to adjust to a much more difficult and fast-paced NBA level, and he might not wind up starting from day one in certain situations, but in time, provided he makes enough shots, he should grow into a useful, versatile perimeter option. Troy Weaver vowed to take a big swing on draft night and did just that, opting for the considerable upside of Ausar Thompson over the alternatives. The Thompson twins, born within a minute of each other, ended up being picked 5 minutes apart, in the same order they came out of their mother's womb. Number 6 pick, Orlando Magic, Anthony Black. Black shot the ball well at his recent pro day, presumably a good sign for his pre-draft process, as he'll need to persuade prospective teams his jumper can reach a level that makes him an adequate off-ball threat. The Wizards, now under the leadership of former Clippers general manager Michael Winger, will presumably swing on the best prospect available but have long been seeking greater stability at lead guard, and could fulfill both criteria with this pick. Black's positional size, feel and two-way upside vibe with where the NBA game seems to be headed. The Magic have positioned themselves quite well after selecting Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner in the past 2 drafts, setting up to push for their first playoff berth since the COVID-shortened 2020 season. Entering this draft with 2 lottery picks in hand, Orlando has a range of available options in terms of pairing rookies together, as well as potentially moving around in trades. The Magic can create significant cap space this summer and are hoping to make a jump next season, making this a key juncture to add more young talent before potentially throwing open a competitive window. Black enters the NBA with a sneaky amount of upside, as a prospect who bloomed late, is still developing skill-wise, and has relied to this point on his size and excellent feel for the game. There's a lot of room for him to expand his offensive game. Most importantly, he'll need to be able to knock down open shots, but provided his confidence and scoring ability keeps growing, Black can be the type of oversized playmaker teams covet. He's also one of the better defenders in the draft, with great balance and anticipation at his size, able to guard all over the perimeter and make an impact. Considering that skill set framework and how much he's improved in a relatively short time, Black could wind up as one of the best players in this draft. Number 7 pick, Indiana Pacer, Bilal Coulibaly. Coulibaly continues to play a key supporting role as Metropolitans 92 competes in the Pro A playoffs, scoring 15 points on 5 for 8 shooting in Tuesday's semifinal win against ASVEL. His production has been up and down, but it would appear he's on track to stay in the draft, having shown enough flashes alongside Wembanyama to justify a first-round selection. However, his team's success has left Coulibaly unable to work out for Team Stateside, which puts him in a bit of flux, at least for the time being. The Wizards traded up to acquire this pick from the Pacers in order to select Coulibaly, confirming a growing league-wide suspicion that he was Washington's target at No. 8. Sources suggested the Wizards were concerned about another team trading ahead of them to select him. Utah, sitting at No. 9, was particularly hot on Coulibaly's trail and were aggressive in securing him at this spot. The Wizards dealt 2 second-round picks to the Pacers to ensure they got their man. Coulibaly's rise from beat player to essential playmaker of Victor Wembanyama's Metropolitans 92 team that made the French finals did wonders for his standing in the draft, catapulting him into lottery conversations and ultimately landing here. Still 18 years old at 6'8" with a 7'2", 25 wingspan, Coulibaly's physical profile, versatile defense and room to grow make him a highly intriguing fit for the NBA game. While he's likely to require a year or two of seasoning, you can argue his long-term upside among the best in the draft, and as he learns to assert himself more on offense, there may be layers to his game he hasn't shown yet. Number 8 pick, Washington Wizard, Jarace Walker. Many NBA eyebrows were raised last week when Walker called off his pro day appearance in Santa Barbara at the last minute, despite looking completely healthy on first glance. The immediate suspicion among teams was that a team has elected to shut him down, something we'll likely learn more about depending on how his workout schedule evolves the next few weeks. Regardless of whether that's the case or not, Walker's fit on Indiana's roster looks extremely strong, as the Pacers don't have a player they can point at his position who is a clear-cut starter long-term. Walker's defensive versatility, passing acumen and developing perimeter shooting prowess could be an ideal fit here. The Wizards are preparing for a full rebuild under new president Michael Winger, and the Bradley Beal trade was the first domino to fall in that process. With the No. 8 pick, the Wizards sit in a position to grab whoever they view as the best long-term prospect available. The Wizards filled their long-term point guard hole by trading for Tyus Jones, but it's hard to assume much about Washington's roster moving forward with the understanding that more veterans could all be on the move. Walker is slightly undersized for a big man at a hair under 6'8" in shoes, but more than makes up for that with a 7'5" wingspan and chiseled 249-pound frame. His tools, combined with his mobility and toughness, give him a chance to be one of the best and most versatile defenders in this class, allowing him to carve out a role early in his NBA career. He's shown flashes of perimeter shooting and passing that are highly intriguing. Although his overall offensive polish, especially as a ball handler, is still a major work in progress since he's not the most fluid or naturally skillful player around. Number 9 pick for Utah Jazz, Taylor Hendricks. The Dallas pick creates an intriguing swing spot in the lottery, with the Mavs looking to stay competitive around Luka Doncic and wielding this pick as a useful trade chip in improving the roster. That said, the Mavs should be in the market to improve their frontcourt no matter what, and grabbing Hendricks, who provides both rim protection and floor spacing, would be a feasible step in that direction. Hendricks is in play with teams all over the lottery due to his versatility and the intrinsic value of his skill set. The Jazz are in one of the NBA's latter most enviable positions, amassing a horde of draft picks in the Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert trades, a sparkle and clean cap sheet, and two major building blocks in Lauri Markkanen and Walker Kessler, who they shrewdly acquired in those aforementioned trades. Despite the franchise's rosy outlook, there's still considerable work to do in filling out the roster, particularly the backcourt's playmaking, shooting and scoring punch to return to the playoffs after missing the postseason for the first time in 7 years. The team was much fastier under highly regarded coach Will Hardy than anyone thought they would be, which quickly took them out of the running for a top pick. The front office will need to continue to take swings to add star power to ensure they don't get stuck in a middle ground of being competitive enough to avoid drafting high, but not good enough to win a playoff series. Hendricks fits a clear mold NBA teams are seeking as a 6'9" one-half power forward with impressive defensive versatility, finishing prowess and perimeter shooting, converting 39% of his three-pointers on the season. He plays exceptionally hard, can protect the rim or switch onto smaller players, knows his limitations, and has significant upside to grow into as his 204-pound frame fills out. NBA teams want to see his passing, ball handling and all-around feel for the game improve to be more than just an excellent role player. But at 19 years old, and with the impressive trajectory he's on, it's hard to put a ceiling on his potential. Number 10 pick for Dallas Mavericks, Cason Wallace. Wallace measured better than expected at the draft combine but appears to have a bit of a wider range on draft night than other lottery candidates, as some teams don't view him as a surefire point guard or primary creator and others question his scoring credentials. Still, there aren't many better defenders in the class than Wallace. His strong dimensions, comparable to multi-positional guards like D'Anthony Melton, Bruce Brown and Tyrese Maxey, give him significant versatility to tap into when paired with his excellent instincts and intensity level, especially when surrounded with talent on a playoff team. The Thunder traded up from No. 12 to No. 10 with the Mavericks to select Wallace, a player they quietly coveted. With Orlando's No. 11 pick viewed as a potential trade spot, Oklahoma City was aggressive in trading up to secure him, ensuring another team couldn't move in front. Wallace has ideal size and length for a guard at 6 hanggang 4 in shoes with a 6'8", 5 wingspan and a 195-pound frame that should fill out nicely in time. His calling card in the NBA revolves around his toughness and defensive versatility, as he consistently hawked the point of attack for Kentucky, generated turnovers in bunches, and showed the ability to guard bigger and smaller players. Wallace's offensive aggressiveness was a mixed bag at times. But he showed enough potential as a perimeter shooter, 35% three-point and passer to feel comfortable projecting improvement here as his shot creation and finishing evolves. There's a market for combo guards in this mold who can change the pace of a game defensively and offer enough shooting and unselfishness to serve as complementary options operating alongside star. Number 11 Pick 4. Orlando Magic. Jett Howard. Howard is a bit of a polarizing prospect in this class, as he seems to have some real fans in NBA front offices. But also some teams weren't impressed at all with what they saw from him in Big Ten play as he was playing hurt. The way Howard shot the ball at the CAA Pro Day served as a good reminder for teams of the coveted role he can play, as there's clearly more to his game than just his jumper. He'll have to continue to perform well on the private workout circuit to solidify his standing. Rival teams weren't sure if the Magic, one of the youngest teams in the NBA, would be looking to roster a second lottery pick on top of their already sizable stable of talent. Ultimately, the depth of this draft class was too enticing for the franchise to pass up, causing them to stand pat at no. 11. Howard started off hot at Michigan, then battled nagging ankle problems for much of the season, losing the lottery-level buzz, but still projecting as a mid to late first-rounder on the strength of his jump shot. As the son of longtime NBA vet Juwan Howard, Jett's game is quite different, with project-able size and consistent shooting mechanics on the wing, as well as some room to add to his game off the dribble and defensively. There's typically a place for tall, talented shot-making wings in the NBA, however, there's some downside if Howard doesn't make shots at the level his draft slot suggests he should. Number 12 Pick 4. Oklahoma City Thunder. Dereck Lively 2. Lively is another player who generated significant buzz at the Clutch Pro Day, appearing to be in outstanding shape physically, shooting the ball exceptionally well from the perimeter and bringing a degree of intensity and aggressiveness we didn't always see in his lone season at Duke. He'll have to validate that in private workouts, but the dearth of big men in this class gives him the ability to be a riser on draft night, especially as teams consider the fact that he was the No. 1 recruit in his high school class entering the season. He seems to have plenty of upside left to tap into as his frame continues to fill out. The Thunder traded up from No. 12 to No. 10 here with the Mavericks to select Cason Wallace, a player they quietly coveted. With Orlando's No. 11 pick viewed as a potential trade spot, Oklahoma City was aggressive in trading up to secure him, ensuring that another team couldn't move in front of them. Lively has gradually built a good case for himself as the top-known Wembanyama rim protector in a draft thin on centers. He offers excellent measurables and above-average mobility at 7'2", made significant strides after initially struggling to adjust at Duke, and capped it off with a positive pre-draft process that reminded teams why he was such a highly regarded recruit. It's hard to find players his size, and while Lively has quite a bit to improve upon in all areas, he should be able to impact games defensively, run the floor, and finish plays at a high level. Most of his impact will come from protecting the paint, but there aren't that many prospects that come along in his mold that also have his type of physical abilities. Number 13 Pick 4. Toronto Raptors. Gradey Dick. There's been some chatter that the Magic might not keep both of their lottery picks. They should certainly have options if they choose to try to move around, but a scenario like this where Dick is available to them at No. 11 could lead them to stay put. Orlando needs to surround Banchero and Wagner with shooting, and would achieve that here by adding one of the top shooters in the draft. Teams view Dick as a lock to come off the board in the lottery. After missing the playoffs for the second time in 3 years, the Raptors are in an interesting position. Despite being just 4 years removed from winning a championship, they had a coaching change this offseason and are potentially on the verge of significant roster changes depending on which direction the front office elects to go. Scottie Barnes didn't take the jump some hoped after his Rookie of the Year campaign last season, and there are questions about how high this team's ceiling is with Pascal Siakam spearheading the offense. The backcourt may be in line for an overhaul with Fred VanVleet and Gary Trent entering free agency, and the team will be looking to significantly improve their spacing by adding much-needed shooting after ranking among the league worst in that department. Gradey is arguably the best perimeter shooter in this draft, a 6'7" wing with a sturdy frame, a high skill level, a solid feel for the game, and competitiveness and swagger that should make him a plug-and-play option early in his career. He has ideal shooting mechanics and footwork, relocating for open looks, pulling up off the bounce and even coming off screens in small doses. Dick's foot speed defensively will be tested by more explosive opponents, and he'll need to continue to improve as a passer and finisher to become a higher usage option. But at 19 years old, there's quite a bit to like about his outlook and profile, which almost every team in the NBA could use to some extent. Number 14 pick for New Orleans Pelicans, Jordan Hawkins. Although Hawkins is widely viewed as the top shooter in the draft, there's a bit of disagreement among executives as to where exactly he becomes worth the bet, whether that's late lottery range or further down. He's expected off the board somewhere between picks 11 and 19, offering NBA-ready movement shooting skills that many teams feel they can utilize immediately. The Raptors were near the bottom of the league in three-point shooting last season and would certainly help address that need with Hawkins, whom teams view as a plug-and-play type of talent. The Pelicans have been all over the rumor mill leading into draft night, but a potential move into the top 3 of the draft appeared to hang on their willingness to part with Brandon Ingram or Zion Williamson. Such a move never materialized, and after exploring moving around elsewhere in the draft, New Orleans stayed in a spot to pick the best talent available at No. 14. Hawkins played a major part in UConn's championship run and saw his draft stock steadily climb as a result, having showcased himself as arguably the draft's top shooter, particularly running off of screens. While he can sometimes be slapped with the specialist label, Hawkins is more athletic than your typical pure three-point shooter and plays with a good level of toughness, endearing him to teams as a potential plug-and-play option. The scarcity of true, dynamic movement shooters like Hawkins helped make him an appealing option in this part of the draft, and there's certainly upside as he refines that skill set. Number 15 pick for Atlanta Hawks, Kobe Bufkin. Bufkin looks to be well established in this range of the draft, having set himself apart somewhat as a two-way contributor who can fulfill a range of needs in the backcourt. He measured well for a combo guard at north of 6'4" barefoot, which helps him comparatively in this range, where his well-roundedness becomes a strong sell. Bufkin is in play for teams beginning in the late lottery and at this point would seem firmly entrenched in the top 20. The Hawks went through a somewhat tumultuous season undergoing changes in both the front office and coaching staff. They have some difficult decisions ahead regarding the future of Trae Young and their increasingly difficult cap situation, which may see them bump up against the new CBA's letter second apron with pending extensions for DeJounte Murray, Onyeka Okongwu and others. The team explored the trade market for John Collins, Clint Capella and Dandre Hunter in the lead-up to the draft, and ultimately decided to stand pat for what promises to be an important summer in store. Bufkin's rise from the fringes of the draft radar all the way into the lottery has been an exciting story for those watching closely after struggling to adjust in his first year at Michigan. His game took flight as a sophomore, still young for his class. He plays with great energy on both ends of the floor, and has flashed the ability to score at all three levels. Most scouts agree his upside lies in whether he can develop into a point guard, where his size and quickness should give him an advantage, but there are also reasonable scenarios where Bufkin plays more of a supporting role than a lead playmaker. In a draft full of guards who may be best suited combos, he offers arguably the most upside to develop into more than that. 16 Pick 4, Utah Jazz, Keyonte George. Following a strong pro day in Chicago, George continues to jockey for position among a large group of guards expected off the board in the late lottery and teens. Although he elected not to measure or test at the combine, George appears to have worked himself into excellent shape, which might address to some extent teams' concerns over his physical profile. Teams still feel he has some maturing to do, but his skill level and gifts as a scorer have kept his stock somewhat stable. If he falls out of the lottery, it shouldn't be too far. Holding 3 first-round picks in different parts of the draft, the Jazz are one of the more interesting actors in the 2023 draft, capable of going in several directions. If they keep their picks, what they do at no. 16 will undoubtedly be influenced by who they take at no. 9 as they put pieces in place for what could be a somewhat quick rebuild thanks to the development of Lauri Markkanen and Walker Kessler. Entering draft night, George looked like a candidate to fall a bit, due in part to the large group of guards in the NOS 10-20 range. He's a skilled offensive player with excellent scoring instincts, particularly for his age, and offers some nice shot creation upside in the backcourt moving forward. However, George's contributions in other areas often left something to be desired, as his defensive awareness is sometimes subpar, and his decision-making can be a bit too shot-happy at times. There's a lot of room for growth, but also a chance he winds up as a somewhat replaceable, undersized two-guard. At this point in the draft, he's a solid investment and could develop into a useful rotation player and work up from there. 17 Pick 4, Los Angeles Lakers, Jalen Hood-Schifino. Hood-Schifino is one of the big winners of the measurements and pro day portions of the draft process, as he clearly possesses all-star level physical tools with his tremendous size, frame and length for a point guard. Players with his caliber of upside tend to rise as we get closer to the draft. Many executives pivot into home run swing mode at this stage of the lottery, especially teams like the Jazz who have 3 picks at their disposal and some clear holes to plug in the backcourt. The Lakers exceeded expectations with a successful playoff run culminating in an appearance in the Western Conference Finals. With LeBron James continuing to be one of the best players in the league and Anthony Davis having an encouraging season, there's plenty of room for optimism about bringing the band back and making another run in the West, which is as wide open as it has been outside of the defending champions. That starts on draft night, armed with the highest pick they've had since selecting Lonzo Ball in 2017, which they'll need to use wisely considering the luxury tax crunch they are in and the limited means for improvement that exist in the new collective bargaining agreement. Hood-Schifino has steadily climbed up draft boards all season. He's one of the most physically gifted prospects in the class at 6'5", 5 in shoes, 217 pounds with a 6'10 wingspan, enviable measurements considering he spent much of the season at point guard in a pick-and-roll heavy offensive scheme at Indiana. The flashes he shows as an off-the-dribble shot maker and leave-dribble passer are enticing, especially when paired with the toughness he displays defensively, which was his calling card as a prospect prior to college. Finding more consistency with his decision-making, shooting and off-ball awareness defensively will help determine how big of a splash he makes early in his career. But there's little doubt that he has considerable upside to grow into long-term thanks to his tools and talent. 18 Pick 4, Miami Heat, Jaime Jaquez Jr. Jaquez took care of business in leading UCLA to a third consecutive Sweet 16, doing all the little things that make him a winning player. He made a pair of three-pointers, moved the ball intelligently, went to work creating his own shot in the high, mid or low post, and made big plays defensively, all things we've become accustomed to seeing in his 4 years with the Bruins. Nothing he does is particularly aesthetically pleasing or looks certain to seamlessly translate to what his role will be in the NBA, but it's difficult not to appreciate the tremendous feel for the game, competitiveness and versatility Jaquez. After ultimately losing out on Bradley Beal to the Suns, the Heat will presumably remain in the hunt for whichever star guard next becomes available. For now, they're left to pick at no. 18, where they can add a younger player to their core. Miami is facing a cap crunch with playoff stalwarts Gabe Vincent and Max Strus up for new contracts, and also stands to beef up its perimeter defense moving forward. The Heat tends to buck consensus and take who they want in the draft, making this pick a bit tricky to peg for rival teams entering the night. Having more than proven himself during a decorated UCLA career, Jaquez is the type of tough, intelligent and versatile player who should help his new team immediately. Jaquez doesn't have one elite skill, but he also doesn't have many glaring weaknesses. He is able to toggle between both forward spots, make open shots, and win extra possessions in the run of play as a rebounder and defender. He's one of the more NBA-ready players in the class and so his stock rise for that reason. 19 Pick 4, Golden State Warriors, Brandon Podziemski. Podziemski had an excellent showing in the first game of the NBA Draft Combine, demonstrating impressive passing creativity, shot-making versatility and toughness on the glass. There's a clear niche for skilled guards in his mold who bring a strong feel for the game. He shot 45% from 3 this season, which has elevated his stock into first-round territory. The Warriors followed up their NBA championship in 2022 by losing to the Lakers in the Western Conference semis, which opened up quite a few question marks about how much juice is left to be squeezed out of the aging core of Stephen Curry, 35 years old, Klay Thompson, 33, and Draymond Green, 33. Changes coming to the collective bargaining agreement will make it very expensive and increasingly difficult to continue to add players to the roster, which makes this draft pick all the more important considering how little the team has gotten out of their last half-dozen picks the past 3 years. Initially only testing the waters, Podziemski had a highly successful pre-draft process that saw him raise his stock considerably at both the NBA Combine and private workouts. Podziemski fits the mold of guard many NBA teams are actively seeking, capable of playing on or off the ball, showing dynamic shooting with his feet set or pulling up off the dribble, and having an excellent feel for the game, creating for teammates intelligently or moving to open spots on the floor to help his team's ball movement. There are some concerns defensively revolving around his short wingspan, 6'5", and average foot speed, but Podziemski's competitiveness, toughness and rebounding prowess are traits several NBA teams mentioned as standing out in individual workouts. 20 Pick 4, Houston Rockets, Cam Whitmore. Whitmore helped his cause by putting his tremendous physical tools and overall talent on display at the WME Pro Day in Santa Barbara, California. Pretty much every NBA representative in attendance walked away highly impressed by the considerable long-term upside he possesses. It's not clear how Detroit views 34-na-year-old Bojan Bogdanovic's timetable with its young roster despite his team-friendly contract that expires in 2025. But it's easy to see Whitmore's fit with the rest of the Pistons' young pieces, especially Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren. Whitmore will also be firmly in contention for Houston at no. 4, as the Rockets' confidence in landing James Harden could lead them more toward wing options, especially those with better floor spacing potential such as Whitmore. Houston has been exploring trade options involving this pick, with a host of young players already on the roster in addition to their draft pick at No. 4. Creating an opportunity for a value play. If they keep it, the best fit might be a forward who can contribute defensively and make shots, considering there are plenty of ball handlers already on the roster. Whitmore's stock slipped in the weeks leading up to the draft, as teams expressed serious concerns over his medical. There's an opportunity for a major value pick here as a result, as he slides down the board here to the Rockets. It's not hard to see what makes Whitmore so highly regarded on first glance, standing 6'7" in shoes with a ripped 235-pound frame, explosive finishing prowess and a clean shooting stroke that suggests good things to come as a shot maker long-term. Scoring comes easily for the 18-year-old, especially in the open floor and when he can get himself downhill powerfully, where he's an absolute highlight reel. Becoming a better ball handler, passer and decision maker, and a more reliable shooter will be key for reaching his full potential, as well as finding ways to bring intensity and more consistency on both ends of the floor. On pick 4, Brooklyn Nets, Noah Clowney. Clowney's range appears somewhat wide, but his extreme youth, defensive instincts and shooting potential make him one of the more attractive first-round project options. He quietly built up a lot of fans in front offices over the course of the season and has yet to turn 19, making him an appealing development pick, particularly for teams in this part of the draft who can afford to bring him along slowly. The Nets were forced to pivot away from their big three of Kevin Durant, James Harden and Kyrie Irving and start a new era built around Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson and a host of future draft picks. Unfortunately for Brooklyn, the fact that many of their own picks were shipped out in the failed Harden trade means they don't have much choice but to try and stay competitive, which eliminates the possibility of a full-blown rebuild we've seen on other teams. Continuing to improve their backcourt, especially if they can find a point guard of the future to complement Spencer Dinwiddie, looks like a priority in the short term. Playing very much off the radar in South Carolina, Clowney wasn't considered a one-and-done type prospect entering Alabama. He quickly changed the narrative by emerging as the starting power forward of one of the best teams in college basketball and an anchor for a stout Alabama defense that helped deliver both ASUC regular season and conference tournament championship. At 6'10", with a 7'2" wingspan, excellent mobility, and a frame that should fill out considerably, he combines strong tools with the type of floor spacing prowess and defensive versatility every team in the NBA covets. Clowney isn't a polished offensive player, and his lack of physical strength might be an issue projecting to the short term, but he's one of the youngest prospects in the draft, has coveted two-way versatility, and is on the type of trajectory that suggests significant room for improvement down the road. 22 Pick 4, Brooklyn Nets, Dereck Whitehead. Whitehead has been unable to conduct workouts following last month's foot surgery, leaving his stock something of a question mark entering June. That said, letting a player with his youth and pedigree slip toward the back of the first round might be a mistake on the part of teams, considering he's 18 years old and was never quite right during his freshman year at Duke. He would represent an intriguing opportunity in this range of the draft, and a young team like the Pacers, which can afford to be patient with his health and development, might make sense as a soft landing spot. After drafting Noah Clowney with the No. 21 pick, the Nets selected Duke's Dereck Whitehead with their second first-round pick. After entering the season projected in the lottery, Whitehead's one-and-done year at Duke didn't go according to plan, as he dealt with a foot injury that delayed his start to the season and never quite returned to his high school form. What he did do well was shoot the 3 ball, 42% on the season, which, ironically was one of the previous concerns. The real Whitehead is probably somewhere in between the lofty expectations and the current reality. If he can stay healthy, he figures to be a useful utility wing who can supply some scoring and defense on the wing. He's only 18 years old, which suggests he has plenty of time to figure it out, making him a nice pick this far down in the draft. 3 pick 4. Trail Blazers. Kris Murray. After a playoff run that re-energized the franchise and changed the Kings' focus to competing now, they could prefer an experienced college prospect at this selection. In this scenario, it's Murray, with whom they're intimately familiar after drafting his twin brother, Keegan, last season. Reuniting the twins, low-maintenance players whose skill sets complement one another, could pay immediate dividends. But Kris' shooting ability has put him in play for teams beginning in the teens, so it's no guarantee he makes it this far. With their second first-round pick, the Trail Blazers gave us some more insight into their thought process regarding the balancing act they are trying to pull off between staying competitive in the midst of Damian Lillard's prime, while trying to stockpile talent for when his era in Portland inevitably comes to an end. Murray isn't quite the same caliber of prospect as his twin brother Keegan, who was selected fourth by the Kings in 2022, but he does reliably do some valuable things. He can make open shots from range. He can operate effectively without the ball, and he rebounds and defends at a solid level, standing 6'9". Murray projects as a reliable role player, and he's mature enough to understand what his job is. Low-maintenance rotation guys with his type of game can stick in the NBA for a long time. 24 pick 4. Sacramento Kings. Olivier-Maxence Prosper. Prosper had perhaps the single best performance at the combine, dropping 21 points and 7 rebounds in just 22 minutes of action, mostly through pure hustle and activity. He fits a clear mold NBA. Sacramento traded No. 24 to Dallas, who used a traded player exception to also acquire Rickon Holmes from Sacramento and select Prosper. This is a salary cap-focused decision by the Kings. Prosper was one of the biggest winners of the pre-draft process, entering the combine as a projected second-rounder and leaving it with real first-round interest. Good showings on the workout circuit culminated in a green room invite, and his selection here, much higher than anyone would have expected during the college season. At a strong 6'8" with a 7'1" wingspan, Prosper will fit in the NBA physically right away, but may also take some time to develop into a highly active, two-way wing who can help space the floor. He shot just 39.9% from 3 last season in college, a number that will likely need to tick up for him to become an above-average regular. 25 pick 4. Memphis Grizzlies. Marques Sasser. Sasser, battling a groin injury, gutted out one of his best performances of the season relative to the stakes, hitting 5 for 9 threes for Houston en route to 22 points against Auburn. Sasser's shot-making ability was on full display, hitting a difficult transition pull-up 3, 2 snatchback 3s out of isolation to punish the switching big man, and then icing the game with a tough corner 3 off movement. Sasser looked somewhat hobbled pushing in the open court and especially staying in front of the lightning-quick Wendell Green, but that was to be expected considering his injury. How healthy he is able to get in the coming days as Houston takes on Miami and then the winner of Xavier, Texas should they advance will be huge for its Final Four chances, as a strong performance will surely help his cause for first-round pick consideration on draft night. The Celtics drafted Sasser and immediately dealt him to the Pistons in a deal that saw them move back to No. 31 and acquire future second-round picks. Detroit was quite high on Sasser and hoping he'd fall to No. 31, and moved up to ensure another team didn't grab him first. Ausar is one of the more NBA-ready guards in the draft with a strong college resume and well-rounded game. He's a good shooter and defender in the backcourt who can toggle on and off the ball, giving him a nice pathway to immediate value. Teams had concerns about his size and capacity to play point guard at a high level, which didn't prevent him from going in the first round. 26 Pick 4. Indiana Pacers. Ben Shepherd. Every NBA team is looking for plus-size wings such as Shepherd who can do a little more than just shoot. Shepherd appears to have helped himself in the pre-draft process, starting at the NBA Combine where he showed his gaudy production in the Missouri Valley translated against better competition, and then continuing in private workouts, where he shot the ball extremely well after making 41% of his three-pointers this past season. The Pacers entered draft night with 4 picks in the top 32, and were widely expected to move around in search of value rather than use all of them. A breakout showing at the Combine helped vault Shepherd up draft boards and into the first-round picture, proving he belonged after a strong college career at Belmont. The perception that he was purely a specialist has shifted. He's a capable passer and ball handler who can fit in alongside other scorers and space the floor, and yet not quite pure enough a shooter for that to be his only selling point. Shepherd has good traits for a supporting wing. 27 Pick 4. Charlotte Hornets. Nick Smith Jr. Smith did a good job reminding teams why he was considered one of the most talented prospects in the class coming out of high school at the Clutch Pro Day, where he shot the ball well and looked healthier than he did during the season at Arkansas. Most NBA executives expect the Thunder to be active in trade discussions looking to potentially package this pick and future first-rounders in an attempt to move up on draft night, which makes sense considering the shortage of roster spots the Thunder could be working with moving forward with all the talent they've accumulated. The Hornets entered the night one of the most well-stocked teams in the NBA in terms of draft picks, possessing the No. 2 and No. 27 selections in addition to 3 favorable second-rounders. The war-strength offensive team in the league last year, with an extreme lack of shooting throughout the roster, the front office has plenty of work ahead as the franchise ushers in a new ownership group that will surely want to put their imprint on the way the team conducts its business as soon as the sale officially closes. Smith started the season a projected top 5 pick, but ended up seeing his stock drop as injuries limited him to just 17 games, many of which he looked like a shell of himself compared with what we saw in high school. Still, there's a lot to like about the combination of scoring instincts, shot creation prowess, shot-making ability, passing and competitiveness, which portends good things to come considering he just turned 19. Tuldok. His slender frame, as well as his struggles as a finisher around the basket and point-of-attack defender might make it difficult for him to be an overly efficient option on both ends of the floor early in his career. But it's hard not to be enamored with his long-term upside considering what he's shown in 28 Pick 4. Utah Jazz. Bryce Sensabaugh. Sensabaugh has been hobbled by a knee issue he suffered late in Ohio State's season, which required surgery and has thus far prevented him from conducting competitive team workouts. He nevertheless shot the ball well at his pro day last week according to teams that were present, and recently got cleared to begin visiting and working out for teams, which should help reveal a better picture of where his draft stock lies in the coming weeks. This pick felt the most likely of the Jazz's 3 first-rounders to move going into draft night, with Utah in position to add quality players at 9 and 16. It appears they are keeping it, however. Sensabaugh saw his stock slip a bit over the course of the pre-draft process due in part to concerns around his health and conditioning. A knee issue ended his season at Ohio State early that limited what he could do in workouts, falling in line with a history of knee injuries dating back to high school. He's one of the more gifted scorers in the draft, with a smooth jumper and great instincts creating his shot, but isn't much of a defender at this point. If Sensible can get his body right. 29 pick 4, Indiana Pacers. Julian Strother. The Nuggets team rolled through the NBA playoffs to win the franchise's first championship, with a roster built to keep winning for the next several years thanks to shrewd scouting, drafting, trades, free agent acquisitions and cap management. The constraints of the luxury tax seems to be the only thing that could hold back the franchise from being a dominant presence in the West provided good health, which is why the front office pulled off several moves in the lead up to the draft in hopes of acquiring young talent who can help keep their bench units competitive long term. While he was more than simply a specialist in college, Strother's shooting ability is going to be his calling card in the NBA, having proven it at Gonzaga, where he steadily improved and hit 40.5% from 3 on more than 5 attempts per game last season. Continuing to refine his shooting will be his best chance to stay. 30 pick LA Clippers. Kobe Brown. Brown emerged as one of the most skilled and productive big men in college as a 23 years old, surprisingly leading Missouri to a No.7 seed in the NCAA tournament. Brown doesn't look like a high-level NBA prospect at first glance, being undersized and needing to improve his frame. His skill level very much suits the modern NBA, though, as a 45% three-point shooter who initiates quite a bit of offense for Missouri, pushing off the defensive glass and operating in the mid and high post thanks to his strong feel for the game. This pick was nearly traded from the Clippers to the Wizards on Wednesday before a three-team deal involving the Clippers, Wizards and Celtics fell apart. That deal took place with Memphis as the third team, instead of LA. So the Clippers entered the night sitting here at 30 after all. Thought to be eyeing an array of wing players that could fall to the back of the first round. Brown enjoyed a strong year at Missouri, making strides as a shooter and showcasing his toughness and versatility over the course of a winning season for his team. He piqued NBA interest as a result, with teams always hunting for glue guys who can make shots, pass, and contribute on the glass. There are some concerns about Brown's heavier body type and defensive contributions. He's active but a bit slow-footed. He offers a lot to like at this point in the draft, if not a ton of ups.